Thank you for joining us. I'm Bernd Körber, head of Mini, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first ever 3-day UrbanX Summit on behalf of our team, our companies, UrbanUs, and the entire BMW Group. Mini was born out of innovation and the desire to improve city life in a meaningful way. Following a fuel crisis in 1959, Sir Alex Zigonis created the classic Mini, a clever solution for urban mobility, small, economical, affordable, and what has remained a timeless style icon. This spirit of taking challenges and making it an opportunity has carried us through our 60 years of history. This, and our belief that cities are at the heart of innovation, especially when it comes to sustainability and climate action, is what led us to create UrbanX, to support startups working to make city life brighter. By partnering with UrbanUs, the leading early-stage investor in urban tech startups, our goal is to run the best accelerator program for startups reimagining city life. After just 5 years and at a time when new solutions are urgently needed, our 65 portfolio companies include many of the leading startups across mobility, energy, and the built environment. This year, we have rethought our traditional demo day format in favor of a conversation approach. One that puts our founders in conversation with key experts to address some of the most critical issues we have at hand. Today, following close to a year and a half of social isolation in the wake of pandemic, that's highlighted the urgent need for community and togetherness. We will discuss the importance of building strong communities and investing in those around us. Thank you for your interest, support and commitment to brighter city life. I'm pleased to hand it off to Shaun Abrahamson, Managing Director of UrbanUs, who will introduce today's speakers.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for the welcome, Bernd. The last year has highlighted the power of communities. We've seen everything from wild stock trading on Reddit to communities coming together to support their local small businesses as they recover from the pandemic. We've really never had so many ways to coordinate large groups of people online, and we're really excited about what we might be able to do to organize people to fight climate change. So first up, we've made 3 new investments. The first is Oonee. They are providing safe and secure parking for people who have bought new e-bikes or are now riding electric scooters or even electric boards. And that really overcomes one of the biggest obstacles to micromobility adoption, which is safe and secure parking. Dorothy is also focused on smaller businesses, and in particular, they're helping businesses either avoid disruption or recover quickly because they're anticipating far more unplanned events like floods or freezes. And then finally, there's OneRoof, and OneRoof is making it easier for us to meet our neighbors in multifamily buildings. And we're finding that that's useful for everything from recovery and in a lot of cases just for fun. And so before we hear from these 3 founders, I'd also like to welcome Janie Bavishi, who's the director of New York City's Office of Resiliency. And I'd also like to introduce our moderator for the next session, Lisa Hymas, who's the senior editor at Canary Media. Over to you, Lisa.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction, Shaun, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm excited to be here and have the opportunity to introduce you to a creative and talented trio of entrepreneurs who are working to make our cities better. I'm Lisa Hymas, senior editor with Canary Media, a new media outlet that is covering the transition to a clean energy future. I'll quickly introduce our 3 business founders who are part of the UrbanX Accelerator program. Shabazz Stewart is the CEO and co-founder of Oonee. Celine Sonmez is the CEO and co-founder of OneRoof. And Ariana Armelli is the CEO and co-founder of Dorothy. They are all coming from different angles, but working toward the larger goal of improving our cities and our communities. So in their case, that involves building critical infrastructure, helping people rebound from or avoid disasters, and fostering human connection. I think we're all feeling good right now that our cities are starting to come back to life after a difficult 15 months. So it's an exciting time to be working on urban resilience and sustainability. So let's get to it. I have some questions for our panelists to get the conversation rolling. And we'll also have a few minutes at the end of the hour for questions from you in the audience. You can ask questions in the chat at the bottom of whatever platform you're using to watch us. So Zoom, LinkedIn, YouTube, post your questions and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. So we are, let's start off. I want to start off by asking our three business founders for a 2-minute elevator pitch about their companies. Shaun told us a little bit about what you're doing, but it'd be good to hear from you directly. So what is your company and what does it do? And we'll keep these introductions quick and then we can delve more into specifics and details in some follow-up questions. So Ariana, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Hi, so nice to be here. I'm Ariana Armelli, co-founder and CEO at Dorothy, and we built a data-backed solution to provide quick and easy cash advancements to property owners who go through unexpected events like natural disasters. Our advancements are secured by your insurance claim rather than your credit score, so we're able to provide a lower interest rate than your traditional bank or online lender. And our goal is to be your safety net from the time of the unexpected event to when you receive your insurance claim. So we actually help walk you through the correct filing process and even fight to get you a higher payout in the end. My background is in architecture, planning, and insurance adjusting. I spent about 10 years in the planning industry working on large-scale infrastructural developments, primarily located in or near flood zones, and I became fascinated with this problem after Hurricane Sandy hit New York City in 2012. I'm super happy to be here and I can't wait to get started.
Okay, thanks. Celine, can you jump in next?
Yes, hello. I'm Celine. I'm the co-founder and CEO of OneRoof. OneRoof is a social network in residential buildings. So in short, our platform connects people who live in the same building to become a community and to be more resourceful. So they join the group by the unique 6-digit code that their management or the super neighbor, which I'll dive deeper into, gives them. And they connect based on common interests like pets, plants, running, gaming. And it's a way to foster interesting conversations, ask questions, get support around the neighborhood or in the building, and build friendships that create value around home. And as a result, landlords get reduced turnovers because a Harvard data suggests that tenants are 80% more likely to renew their lease if they know 2 people in the building, and hence create a better urban living experience. Nico and I are the founders of OneRoof, and it's our second startup. First one got acquired. And also a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Great. Thanks, Celine. Shabazz, over to you now.
Greetings from Brooklyn. My name is Shabazz Stewart, the founder and CEO of Oonee. And we build secure bike parking systems for communities. What makes Oonee a little bit different is that we're focused on systemic scale. So when you think about New York City has 3,000 bus shelters. We've got 400 newsstands. We've got 1,700 Wi-Fi kiosks. We've got 1,000 bike share stations. We think that secure bike parking infrastructure should be as common or more common than all of those things. If we are to get to a future where micromobility, bikes, scooters, one-wheels, etc., are going to be 20 to 30% of all trips in our cities, we need to build this kind of infrastructure, and we need to build it fast, and we need to build it on scale. Typically, infrastructure is not something that we've seen private sector startups or even increasingly governments take on, but we think there's a lot of underlying value in tackling the hard problem, and we think there's a lot of opportunity to be captured by being the system that users, citizens, community members turn to park bikes and scooters and to get them service. We think it's the fastest growing market in terms of transportation in the world today. And we think it's the next big thing in terms of what transforms our cities into the communities of tomorrow.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask each of you what cities you are operating in currently or looking to expand into soon. And maybe we'll go in reverse order. Shabazz?
We're currently operating in New York. We're just emerging from what we would call our MVP phase. We had 3 stations, one in Manhattan, one in Journal Square, which is actually in Jersey City, right across the river from Manhattan, and we have one in downtown Brooklyn. When we started the journey, a lot of folks told us that New York was going to be the last place we should start. We should actually go somewhere else where the challenge was perhaps a little bit easier or government was less intractable. But I think that always felt wrong to us. We knew that the principles of how to work with government and communities are the same anywhere. And so when we launched our first station in downtown Manhattan, our partner in the Alliance for Downtown New York, the city's largest business improvement district, sat by the phone in consternation. They were super nervous because when you introduce new infrastructure to a city like New York, let's just say that for every New Yorker, there are like 4 complaints and 25 opinions. So they sat by the phone and they waited. When the phone started ringing, it was members of the community saying, hey, why aren't there more of these? This is great. And so our story has been on the world's largest stage, we're seeing people flock to this kind of solution. And we've really created a lot of credibility value that now we're looking to export to other markets across the nation and across the globe.
Okay, great. Celine, where is OneRoof right now?
So OneRoof, we are in 18 residential buildings right now, and with the exception of one, we are also in New York, in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And similar to Shabazz, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. It's a kind of a saying that we believe in as well. But more importantly, there is 1.4 million units in the multifamily market, rental market in New York, which is the largest in the country. And that is our target, to enter structure or buildings that have 20 plus units. So we've picked this market to start with, but we will be growing soon enough into other large markets that have a lot of multifamily inventory, like LA, Dallas, Houston, Miami, and then Boston and Philly also for the student markets.
Okay, great. And Ariana, where is Dorothy looking to get rolling?
So we're building out pipeline customers in Tennessee, Louisiana, Texas, Florida, and the Carolinas right now. Primarily all of the areas that are going through flash flooding warnings over the summer. So I think that's probably where we'll at least launch our focus. But our long-term strategy is to be able to scale that into other types of disaster risks besides for flooding, which would allow us to enter into the California bushfire market, and then even come into New York at a later date.
Okay, great. I'm curious about what inspired each of you to start your companies. And I bet I could guess with Shabazz, maybe you had a bike stolen?
I actually had 3 bikes stolen in a period of 5 years. And I'll talk a little bit about my background and my journey, and how it relates to Oonee and how it sets the stage for our work. I come from a business improvement district. I was the Deputy Director of Operations for New York City's 3rd largest bid. I oversaw a portfolio of 1.1 million square feet of public space in downtown Brooklyn. And so when I lost my 3rd bike, or when I was relieved of my 3rd bike, to be more precise, I thought with my co-founder, who was an architect, why can't there be a system to accommodate the growing number of folks who are relying on their bikes and scooters to travel around the city? And if we have 472 subway stations in New York, if we have a network of buses, commuter rail,
Did we just lose Shabazz there? Okay, you're back.
Can you guys?
Yeah, we can hear you.
No? Oh, okay. So that that kind of exercise in thinking about the value of cycling not as just an amenity that's a one-off, but as a system of public goods is what really inspired me to leave the bid and to apply all the lessons that we learned there in working with communities and government to advocate and implement and operate this kind of infrastructure, and thinking through innovative business models that we could apply so that we could really not just unlock the value, but really build a sustainable business that could serve the public good, but also serve investors as well.
Great, thank you. Ariana, what inspired you? You mentioned something about Hurricane Sandy. Maybe you could tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, sure. So in 2012, I had just started my career as an architect, and I was working in Manhattan when Hurricane Sandy hit. I just finished undergrad, and I remember quite vividly a few of our friends from school were out in the Rockaways, and they were reaching out to us on Facebook saying how, this was like a month after the storm, by the way, that they hadn't received any aid yet, and they were looking for some of us to help kind of pull things out of the basement, any hands that they can get. So I had went out there with my best friend, Maureen, and, she's like 5'2", and I was like very, very skinny at the time. And we went out there with kind of like a shovel, and we just started going from house to house. And I just remember what I saw there was nothing like I've ever seen in New York City before. There was like 10-foot piles of sand, 10 blocks in from the beach, and almost all of the residential homes were absolutely gutted. And her and I just kind of went from house to house, going into these families' homes and, saying, do you need a hand? Can we help with any of the debris removal? And they were like, honestly, you're the first people, to help us outside of the neighborhood almost. We haven't really received any financial help yet. They were still waiting for their federal aid insurance payments to come through. So they couldn't really hire any service providers at that point. So we were just like pulling out debris, pulling out insulation the whole day. And, by chance, it just piqued my interest to ask these people what that process was like and how long it took them. And what they said is that, we had our flood insurance, we filed our claim, but we're still waiting for that money. And it's taking longer than we can really handle. And we're probably going to have to pay for these types of this reconstruction on our own, and we don't have it. So that was early on in my career. I didn't necessarily do too much about it at that time. I continued in my architecture career for quite a bit, but it did stick with me for many years. And in 2017, when I saw similar stories play out in Puerto Rico and also in Houston, it was very similar to the same stories I heard in the Rockaways, and realized that this problem hasn't really been addressed yet in the way that maybe it needs to. And I was at the right point in my life and in my career to sort of make a shift and jump into entrepreneurship. So that's really when Dorothy got its first legs.
Okay, great. Thank you. Celine, could you tell us about, what inspired you?
Yes, so OneRoof is a fairly new startup. We started at the end of January, and I can say that it is a COVID child, because as the rest of the world, we felt isolation. We couldn't socialize, and we were relying on people who are in close proximity to where we were living, aka our neighbors. Except in most urban cities, the communication between neighbors never go further than just a nod in the elevator. And so we set up an MVP, rolled out a basic version of our platform in our own building, which is 130 units. And we had incredible connections happening. We started meeting and quarantining together on the roof. We were exchanging items. We were getting our puppies to play together. We became friends. We even organized camping trips together, and our life changed. So we saw the opportunity to bring this way of communication to everyone else who's feeling isolated, not only because of COVID, but because of increasing loneliness, or even if one doesn't feel lonely, just the opportunity to leverage the convenience of being in close proximity with people who could be your friends or could be contributing to your life, and vice versa. And then we also saw that multi-billion-dollar companies that are really niching down on communities in their own verticals, like Slack's acquisition for Workplace, or Discord being valued super high for being a community of gamers, or Public, which is a community for financial markets. We saw the multi-billion-dollar opportunity in our vertical as well, and so decided to build a company out of it.
Okay, great, thank you. So you all saw problems and set about trying to solve them. I'm curious about the names of your companies. Ariana, maybe we can start with you. Dorothy, what inspired that name?
Well, we're dealing with homes and disasters, so maybe you could take a guess.
Some Wizard of Oz allusion there.
Yeah, there's no place like a safe home.
Right. Nice. Shabazz, Oonee, what does that name mean? Oops, I think you're muted.
We're first Anchor as a stealth pre-launch, and then we really got excited about Cubic. And you know, we were Cubic for until 2017, when we raised money and we discovered, when we did some more diligence, that there was a Cubic that was not only in the space, but also was a publicly traded company. And for those of you who are New Yorkers, or for those of you who are Londoners, Cubic is the company behind the MetroCard. They're behind Omni, which is the MetroCard successor. They're behind the Oyster card. They're behind the Octopus card in Hong Kong. So we were like, nah, we gotta get out of here. We went through a long iterative process to come up with a new name. We settled on Mezi and Kiosk as our two finalists. My partner, who is very much artistically inclined, is more of a left-brainer, you know, was in Japan and said, those names are stupid. We need to think of something that's a little more exciting and unusual. And so I told him he had 24 hours to come up with a new name. And he came back with something very interesting, which was the Japanese word for sea urchin. Those of you who are sushi connoisseurs will know that uni is a delicacy, but it's also this kind of colorful creature that lives underwater, like kind of like a starfish, that has these spikes on the side and above it. And it lives and thrives in all sorts of environments. It comes in all shapes, sizes, and colors. And that really embodied the kind of ethos that we sought to bring to this kind of urban infrastructure, this kind of hardware, something that could not just be tolerated, but could be embraced, something that people could get excited about, something that could be social and fun, but also useful, and something that can thrive in a variety of environments, urban, rural, suburban, or anywhere in between. And so that's how, and of course it was very trademark friendly. That's how we became Oonee.
I love it. Yeah, it's a very memorable name. And Celine, how did you land on OneRoof?
For us, it was kind of random, actually. Before the business was incorporated or anything, it was last summer. I was on the beach with one of my best friends, and she has a branding agency. And I told her, I'm thinking of this idea. What do you think? And she said, oh, I love it. What is it going to be called? I was like, I have no idea. What do you think it should be called? And so we pull out our pen and paper and brainstorm maybe 100 ideas, and then started eliminating them one by one. And OneRoof seemed to make the most sense because it was about shared spaces and connectivity.
That's great. So I'm thinking about, you know, you're all a little bit past the early stages of building out your companies, or still in them, but when you had the idea for your company or started things up, you each had ideas or maybe assumptions about how things would play out. And I'm interested, is there something that turned out to be different than you expected? Shabazz, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about this. Look, again, my background is in policy and is in working with communities to get projects done. And when I started the venture in 2016, 2017, I think we thought that the challenge was going to revolve around how to build and master the technicalities of secure micromobility infrastructure on streets, how to design it well, what is an innovative financial model that's going to work, how to work effectively with with investors to scale that model out, and those all were challenges. But we didn't quite anticipate that we were going to have to become deeply involved in advocacy as well. It was in 2018 when product launched, and we ran into some challenges in getting the city of New York to honor its word. And we would go into these meetings and say, look, we started this company really in partnership with local government, and now they're not living up to what they said they were going to do as fast as they were going to do it. And that was really an existential threat to us. Frankly, it almost put us out of business in 2018. And we really had to go back to the drawing board and say to ourselves, okay, what is the missing piece of the equation to unlock value and unlock opportunity in working with government to make government move faster? And so we discovered that we hadn't really involved the community. We hadn't really told our story to advocates. We were really an unknown quantity. And so those who are familiar with our journey will know that in 2019, we really invested heavily in Twitter. We really invested heavily in going to community meetings. We really invested heavily to working hand in hand with advocates to build a movement to support this kind of infrastructure foundation. And what that did was it really applied engagement and pressure politically on our partners in government from all sides. So traditionally, these communities are kind of, when it comes to mobility startups, when it comes to these kinds of smart city startups, disengaged. They tolerate, if not are outright hostile. We turned that paradigm and that dynamic on its head and said, what if communities, what if advocates, what if citizens were actually our vanguards, were actually fiercely loyal to this concept, actually recognize the work that we're doing as extremely valuable. And I'll close by saying that, we were warned about community boards in New York City. We were warned that, if we put up advertising on the streetscape and we put up these large structures, that we would see community boards, which are notoriously conservative, be quite hostile. In 2020, we're proud to say that we've got one community board in Manhattan, CB6, demanding a secure bike parking plan from the DOT. Another community board's writing to City Hall and saying, CB4, we want secure bike parking, we want the advertisement on it, and there are models that already work. And when we say, when we think about turning that paradigm on its head, 5 city council members coming out explicitly and saying, we like Oonee, we want to see an Oonee expansion. 3 mayoral candidates, Eric Adams, Andrew Yang, and Catherine Garcia, mentioning Oonee by name, saying we want to see an Oonee expansion. That is something that we learned from a near-death experience. We did not think that we would be so involved in advocacy, but we've really become a company that is deeply invested and enshrined in a culture of advocacy and in explaining to government, explaining to stakeholders at every level, public, private, nonprofit, in between, the underlying value in our work. And that's something that we've learned along the way.
That's really interesting. So your community organizing background definitely came to the fore there. Celine, could you tell us about something that turned out differently than you expected in terms of getting OneRoof up and running?
Yes, so we initially thought that the best way to penetrate the market would be to go to landlords and make these B2B contracts and get from a top-down approach. And so we started, and after I think 2 buildings in, we started getting a lot of requests from the residents who are our users, who are the center of our product, asking for codes to invite their neighbors. If they moved out, they were wanting to start OneRoof in their own new building that they are moving into. And we quickly realized that there's a lot of demand coming from the residents, our users. So we built a banner on our landing page. It says, here's how you can start OneRoof in your building. And we set this up at the end of April. So it's been 1 month and we got already 20 inbound requests from people who we call super neighbors, wanting to connect with their neighbors in their building and therefore asking to start OneRoof and take the initiative to start OneRoof in their building. So we didn't think that this would be a faster and wider way for penetration for us, but it is. And it's leading us to grow 58% month over month, mostly focusing on this top up or bottom up approach. So that we didn't anticipate, and we're lucky to have found this early on enough to reshift our focus and business model.
That's great. So both you and Shabazz clearly hit on something for which there's a lot of unmet demand. Ariana, could you talk to us about something that turned out differently than you expected?
Yeah, sure. So the original premise of Dorothy was actually a data company. We thought, well, I thought the answer to climate change and helping consumers was actually to build better data models. So if they had more information on their flood risk or their other disaster risk, they might be more inclined to, put more finances towards recovery efforts or preventative efforts. I could have not been any more wrong on that aspect. Typically, consumers do have, the insurance that they need in order to prepare themselves. It's usually mortgage required in certain risk areas, and any data associated with flood risk, is sort of available for free right now online. So we sort of realized that a couple of months into the company. But what we also realized is that the individuals or institutions that were probably most interested in what we were building on the data side was the insurance industry. So for about a year, we were heavily involved in the insurance industry, building out data models that would essentially be utilized during the underwriting process for disaster insurance policies. We got into that industry specifically with the goal to underwrite our own disaster insurance. We were very interested in developing unique new products that could provide the coverage to consumers that they didn't currently have, or if they needed it. We got very deep into that process and realized that consumer behavior doesn't tend to buy certain insurance policies. If you think about ever renting a car from an airport, how often do you ever buy that like $8 insurance policy on a $40,000 car? I know I don't. So, so we realized that just the behavioral aspect was an important component of developing a product that can actually help people going through these disaster events. So we took a step back as a company and sort of reanalyzed, well, let's look at all the technology we've built out as if we were becoming an insurance company, and let's see what the real problem is and if there's a better solution than what we were building out. And what we found specifically after COVID was that, individuals, business owners, they have insurance, but when the event happens, they're typically waiting, 7 to 10 months for any sort of claim to be settled. So there's a gap in time for when they have the finances to start either rebuilding or maintain cash flow or just to get back on their feet. So what we did is we said, well, could we develop an underwriting strategy that actually looked at different components to approve and qualify individuals for a cash advancement rather than, a high interest loan or a personal loan from your bank, which you'll either be denied for or have a predatory interest rate during these unexpected events. So essentially what we've come up with, and we started as data, but now all of that data is basically fronting what we have as a commercialized product now, is a way to advance a certain amount of money to consumers based on the limits of their insurance policy and allow us to secure payment later on. So it gives individuals a way to get back on their feet almost immediately with cash that they need, while we kind of take them through the process of filing a claim and kind of walk them through it over the months that it will typically take for that to settle. So alleviating that burden off of their back.
Okay, that's really interesting. So I think the lesson here for any entrepreneur is be adaptable and listen to your community. I'm wondering what other things you've heard from community members about what they want and what they need. I mean, Shabazz, maybe I'll direct this to you first. Like, who's using Oonee? What did you learn when it opened up to the community or community members started talking to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Oonee is, at its core, public transit infrastructure, and there are always, as with any infrastructure in the urban space, a variety of use cases. And there's an iterative process where we learn, we make tweaks, and we iterate a bit more. So, when we started Oonee, we didn't really account for working cyclists. For those of you who are not familiar with the New York area, there are 80,000 working cyclists who deliver food for apps like Grubhub and DoorDash and Seamless and Uber Eats. They're mostly of color. They're almost all immigrants, and they're mostly working, at minimum wage or slightly above minimum wage. And we knew that there were going to be commuters, we knew there were going to be residents, and we knew there were going to be folks who we called episodic visitors to our MVPs, to our structures. But we didn't really understand in our own ignorance that there were also going to be a sizable population of working cyclists. And so when we launched, we discovered that there were folks that were coming in after hours, 12:30, 12:45, 1 a.m. Now, we were so ignorant about the use cases in downtown Manhattan that we actually turned our lights off. You could have come inside, you could lock your bike, we were a 24/7 operation, but we turned our lights off to save power, we were solar powered. And so we started getting in contact with those folks, and there was one young man by the name of Nicholas, and he said, look, I deliver for Drizzly, which is a beverage and wine and liquor app. I work from 6 to 12 a.m. I am largely in Manhattan. I live 6 miles away in Bushwick. I'd rather not bike home at 12:30 in the morning. I'll take the subway and I'll leave my bike here and I'll come get it tomorrow, my next shift. And since that time, we've had to recalibrate and adjust our infrastructure to accommodate this really essential population of workers that literally feed New York, that empower our restaurant industry. Right now, working cyclists account for about 20% of our users and about 29% of all use cases, of all interactions. So it's become a plurality of our user base. And that was something we just hadn't conceived of at the onset. And when we have conversations with communities, that kind of iteration really underpins our approach to this infrastructure. What's important to communities? Egalitarianism, that it's open to everybody, that's affordable or free, that we are listening to their feedback in terms of design, providing utility, options like public seating and wayfinding and greenery on the exterior, that we're really thinking about the 40,000 folks that are walking by this infrastructure as our user base as well. And lastly, when we talk to advocates, we talk to folks in government, understanding the gravity of the situation, thinking about the fact that 1 out of every 4 New York households has experienced at least one bike theft. And how can we build a system on scale that really is accessible to all New Yorkers? It's non-exclusive. That's something that people can actually rely on and plan around. And how can we create a system that really is maintained well and is poised to achieve some sort of scale? And that's really a long-term sort of partnership with communities and stakeholders at every level.
That's great, thank you. Celine, I wonder what you've heard from community members, or if there's one community member in particular who sticks out in your mind as someone who's used OneRoof in a way that wasn't expected, or that it was helpful to them.
Yes, so in each building there are multiple users who are leveraging the most, but I would say it's quite equal. Again, we are seeing that 89% of our users are monthly active and 64% are checking the app at least once a week. So it seems that anyone who joins OneRoof is quite active moving forward on it. And in the past 2 weeks, as the cities are opening up, as it was introduced in this panel, we saw 6 to 7, 6th and 7th is to be organized gatherings that were organized by residents among themselves. One of them was a yoga session guided by one of the residents who's working towards becoming a yoga instructor, and she had these pro bono classes she had to fill in. Other one, it was a DJ. He actually did like a rooftop drinks evening for the residents. We're seeing like a board game night that was organized actually on every Thursday in one of our buildings. So there is a lot of value that is being added to users, and we see this from looking at our metrics, the traction, but also looking at the reviews that we get both on App Store, but also that people share in the app. Like they mostly say, where was this platform before pandemic? I'm so glad this is a way to meet all of you. I've never thought of becoming a community in a building before. We're so lucky to have this, etc. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback. And in terms of getting that attention, we want to focus that and use the value that is being created to not only solve isolation and loneliness, but also add value to landlords who have also been very affected by the pandemic because of record high vacancy rates and turnover rates. But it is proven with data that these community and relationships keep people in their apartments, because it becomes harder to move out if you see $100 cheaper rent across the street when you have built relationships for yourself, your kids, your pets. And this value is also highly beneficial for the landlords who want to improve their retention, etc. So we have 2 users, I would say, and both have expressed great happiness and results out of being a part of the platform.
That's great. Thank you. Ariane, is there anything you want to add about feedback you've gotten from community members or potential customers of Dorothy?
Yeah, sure. So we haven't issued we plan to issue our first cash advancements this summer after hurricane season. But what we have done is we built out what we're calling a disaster alert system, which it's actually a number of data sets which allow us to track in real time just certain disaster alert activities that are happening nationally. And what that allows us to do is target and acquire our customer base right at the time that they need us, rather than a couple of months later. So what we're seeing just that our customers are struggling to either pay for certain services to rebuild what has already been damaged from a flash flood or other type of event, and are actively seeking educational tools or some service to help them file and go through that. So we're seeing that, at least on the traction side, that our value proposition is in line with what customers are wanting when they go through these types of events. And then in addition to that, what we're also seeing is the opportunity for us to start integrating potential service providers down the line to help them even a step further than just providing the so we're kind of taking our data hats off now and really listening to what consumers are asking of us, and then building out the full product around what they want.
Great, thank you. So we have a number of questions that have been submitted by viewers, and I'm going to dive into some of those. First one is for Shabazz. Someone is asking, what does the expansion of micro-mobility mean for your business? So there's the expansion of bike lanes. How does that affect your opportunities? And what should the next administration here in New York City be doing in this regard? I'm sure there's a lot you could go into there, but we'll keep it quick.
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep it short out of respect for my fellow panelists. But look, when we started the business, we knew the market was vastly underappreciated and vastly undervalued. So here in New York, 95% of all trips are on personally owned micromobility. City Bike, averages about 50 to 60,000 trips per day, year round, obviously higher in the summer, but there are about 500 to 1 million trips per day on personally owned micromobility. So the city has for years, just like cities across the West, in Europe and the US, has said we want to see micromobility be a central part of the transportation landscape of the future. And now that's happening. It's happening faster than I think many thought it would, and it's happening much to the elation of folks in government. And there's enormous opportunity for Oonee because there's enormous opportunity for society writ large. And it's because there's enormous infusion of resources from government and from advocates in creating that kind of future. So what have we seen? We've seen the nation's first secure bike parking RFP be released late last year. I can't tell you which city that's in, but I can tell you that Oonee won. We're thinking about, we're looking at, the next 40 stations in the New York area over the next year and a half. I can tell you that we've received inquiries and we're in active conversations in cities from Boston to San Francisco to Houston to LA, both on public and private stakeholders, all asking about how we can build these systems as quickly as possible so that we can serve this growing cohort of folks. I think Oonee is in a sweet spot because we are not just benefiting from the increase in micromobility transport, we're also a catalyst for the increase in micromobility transport. There's a wide recognition that secure bike parking, depending on who you ask, is either the leading reason that people who bike choose not to bike more often, or that people who don't have a bike choose not to get a bike or a scooter at all, or it's the second leading reason. And so Oonee is very well positioned to take advantage of a growing marketplace, and by taking on the hard challenge of building, financing, and sustaining infrastructure systems.
Great, thank you. We have a question for Celine. Could OneRoof work outside of a single building? For instance, could it be a solution for a homeowners association? Is that something that you've thought about before?
Yes, absolutely. We've had requests from different states and different types of housing, such as single-family housing in a gated community or a cluster of housing that is owned by the same landlord, etc., even from student housing to perhaps elderly homes, etc. And these are all possibilities and opportunities that we will leverage down the road. Right now, there's 105 million multifamily units in North America that we're targeting, and it's a very vast market. We want to keep focus to have strong foot on the ground as we move forward. So while we did start in multifamily residentials, we are keeping ourselves open to other opportunities to create communities and network within social space, within physical spaces. And we're doing pilots, programs, or as requests come, we're leveraging them as well.
That's great. It does seem like there's a lot of opportunity for growth there. We also have a question for Ariana about Dorothy. What impact will Biden's climate policy have on Dorothy? How do you think about the impact of federal infrastructure funding on your business?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. So about a year and a half ago, I actually met with one of the former heads of FEMA, and it was when Trump was still in office. And I was still pitching kind of flood modeling efforts and grant funding for that. And he was very blunt with me at the time and said, I would wait until this administration is out of office because you're not gonna receive, or you're gonna have an uphill battle for that kind of funding for this type of product. So I would say that in this administration, we're definitely seeing a push towards more federal funding efforts to protect communities and to increase federal budgets for relief efforts. So specifically when we're dealing with disaster events and disaster insurance, and when the effects are so large, private insurers will pull out of these types of markets. We're seeing it in California after last year's wildfires, and we'll probably see it again this year, which means that there needs to be an increase in the federal budget to protect the people that still live there or that will continue to live in these areas. So an administration and the plan that's in place, we definitely see that the federal budget being sort of a parallel to what we're working on, and actually being an asset to us rather than a hindrance.
Great, thank you. We have one question here. It's kind of a big picture question. So how do you think about your role as a founder in addressing the immediate threat of climate change? What role do you see your company playing in community empowerment in a time of pandemic, frequent extreme weather events, and political divide? So that's a very big question, but maybe I would just frame it as, what is your bigger vision for society? How do you see your company fitting into building the kind of world that we all want to see? Anybody want to take that one first?
This is a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Dorothy go.
Yeah, no, I would say that I think the stance that we're taking is really we want to put some power back into the community's hands with their ability to get back on their feet on their own instead of waiting for help. And that's, I think, something that's incredibly important. Just as a founder who builds a company, you you kind of rely on a little bit of help, but it's really important for you to push things forward on your own. And I think that communities typically want to just rebuild on their own. They want to be strong and prepared and not have to rely on aid or things like that to come in months later. So I would say that with our vision and our technology kind of focusing on the claims efforts, is we want to put a little bit of that onus back on the consumer to say, you have the ability to get back on your feet. You have the ability to push back on the time frame for when you're going to receive cash, and you have the ability to get back and start your business now rather than waiting for anyone else to kind of step in and help you, which is something that we definitely saw after this pandemic. And we saw a lot of businesses struggle for 7 months, having to make it on their own without any help. And I think that if they had the ability right now to have some sort of cash to alleviate that, they would have taken it, and they would have been all the stronger for it. So I think that's where Dorothy wants to be, and that's how we want to position ourselves on the side of the community rather than on the aid.
That's great. Thank you. Shabazz, did you want to?
Yeah, I want to talk about three things really quickly. One is fighting climate change. The other is thinking through livability in cities. And the last one is economic mobility. Look, if we're going to fight climate change and we're going to create a climate-friendly future, we have to move beyond runaway car culture in cities. Here in New York, 70% of car trips are under 3 miles. Like 70%. People ain't going very far in their cars. And so, you come to the city of New York, most people in New York, 60% of New Yorkers don't own cars. Only 25% of New Yorkers use cars to get around on a regular basis, yet the streets are filled with cars. And it's not just the emissions. Emissions are very damaging, they're terrible, but it's not just the emissions. It's the manufacturing footprint, the batteries for electric vehicles, right? It's extremely wasteful for our ecosystem doesn't actually carry that many people. If we are going to change that dynamic, we've got to use bikes, scooters, and public transportation. Right now in New York, bikes are like 1%, scooters are like 0.2% of all trips. Getting that up to 25, 30% will change our city. Thinking about livability, thinking about, basically streets that are like highways, unleashing the power of the street so we can do things like eat, dine, walk, play on our streets again. We don't have to dodge cars and play hopscotch with trucks. Thinking about economic mobility, it's expensive to own a car. If you live in a transit desert, if you're out in LA or a city that doesn't have a built-up transit network yet, it's expensive to buy, lease, and to pay insurance for a car. Creating a dynamic where people can rely on their much cheaper bikes and scooters and one-wheels and skateboards to get around, their city will change people's lives. It'll allow people to get to work faster, allow people to have levels of economic freedom and mobility freedom they never enjoyed before. So we're thinking about unleashing the power of micromobility, what that means for cities, and what it means for society as a complete, total transformation of our lifestyle. It means everything.
Great, thank you. And Celine, I'll turn it to you. I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to share on sort of the big picture of how OneRoof is contributing to community empowerment in the time of climate change, or any of those other things.
Yes, so I think all these global issues that are rising that you've mentioned could be solved with collective effort, and that means behavior change. And for behavior change, you need awareness. To have awareness, you need communication. So we are excited about building a company that at least creates these social networks and communities around physical spaces, which are leveraging the convenience of proximity and also using the power of proximity, because decades of research have shown us that face-to-face interactions make people feel less lonely. And in this age of more social media and more online communities, we are seeing rising levels of loneliness. To give you an example, Gen Z, most of Gen Z, if we look at Gen Z communities, 79% of them say they're lonely, versus that 71% for millennials when compared to 50% of boomers. And that is directly in relation to the lack of having face-to-face conversations, being in close touch with people around us. And that's what our mission is, to create that environment, create that network, and empower people towards these global challenges, but also towards loneliness, and being a more supported and connected society, especially in urban areas.
That's great. Thank you. So one last reader question or watcher question. For each of you, what is the best way to follow your journey, and where can we read more about your company? So this is where you get to tell us where we find you online, tell us where we find you on social media.
Sure. So you can find us at hidorothy.com. That's our website. You can pre-qualify for cash advancement. We're also on Twitter and LinkedIn at Dorothy Tech. We don't have an Instagram, sorry, but maybe we'll make one day. But that's primarily our social.
Celine?
Yeah, for OneRoof, you can find us at oneroofapp.com. There you can look through the values of the company for residents or landlords, or request to start a chat in your building if it's a 20 plus unit for now. On social, we're on LinkedIn under OneRoof, or on Instagram, OneRoof Chat App. That we're not that active, but we're getting there. And happy to connect on LinkedIn with anyone as well.
Okay, great. And Shabazz?
You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Ooneepod, OONEEPOD, and at Ooneepod.com. I'm a Twitter loudmouth, and I talk about our journey quite frequently. My Twitter handle is Shabazz, SHABAZZ, Stuart, STUART, as one word.
Okay, great. And with that, I'm afraid we have to wrap up today's conversation. I want to thank all of you who joined us for your engagement and your good questions. Thank you also, of course, to our panelists. We wish you much success going forward. Please be sure to join us tomorrow for day 2 of the summit, which will feature Kanan Ajmira from Builders Patch, Sebastian Cajot from Urbio, Jim Baldwin from Domatic, Sadie McEwen from the Community Preservation Corporation, and my colleague Jeff St. John from Canary Media will be moderating. They'll be discussing how to create a cleaner, more affordable built environment through new AI and data-driven solutions. If there are any accredited investors in the audience who are interested in connecting with Oonee, Dorothy, or OneRoof, please get in touch through the UrbanX website. That's urban-x.com. And also at the website, you can sign up for the UrbanX newsletter, which will tell you about the next cohort of companies being announced later this summer. So on behalf of Canary Media, UrbanX, Mini, and Urban Us, I want to thank all of you for joining us. Please share your favorite part of today's session on social media, #UrbanX Summit. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you.